Cami Knight is here in studio. Cami, this year campaigning on social media, it's become a vital way for presidential candidates to attract votes in the United States, but there's little regulatory framework around the way they're allowed to recruit influencers. Tell us how it works.
That's right. I mean, influencers have a huge following of people who engage with their content and often trust what they have to say. So it's not surprising that politicians have been trying to take advantage of that. Influencer Mikey Angelo, for example, posted this recently, encouraging people to go and vote and disclosing in the hashtag that he was paid by a Democratic Political Action Committee for the post. Legally, though, Angelo actually had no obligation to mention that partnership. Influencer Tana Mojo, who has 5 million subscribers on YouTube, also recently suggested on her podcast that she'd been offered millions to endorse a political party. Take a listen.
I hypothetically was just offered a lot of money to endorse a political party, like millions. Like I was just offered to endorse a political party. And then I was being allegedly told an alleged list of other influencers that have already hypothetically accepted money to do those hypothetical things that were hypothetically offered to me to hypothetically do.
Now, whether what she alleges is true or not, a regulatory gap means content creators are not required to disclose if they've been paid to endorse a candidate on their page. Federal Trade Commission guidelines require influencers to clearly label posts promoting a product or company that they've been paid for, but that only covers commerce. As for the Federal Elections Committee, it chose not to extend its strict transparency rules to influencers last year. It's happening on both sides of the aisle, and it's hard to track how much campaigns are spending on creators because they're often funding large agencies that work with these influencers. The Washington Post, for example, found that the Harris campaign paid nearly $4 million to an agency that develops influencer marketing campaigns and paid other social media firms more than $500,000 as of September. That means users are often left to try to judge for themselves which posts are paid endorsements and which are just free expressions of support. This in a context where 40% of young Americans say they get their news from TikTok. Moving on to other news, Indonesia is making moves to become a regional hub for electric vehicle production. Since July, it's been home to Southeast Asia's first dedicated factory for electric vehicle batteries. Its president wants the country to become a major player across the EV supply chain, but despite a wealth of raw materials, it faces significant challenges in a rapidly changing marketplace. Brian Quinn reports.
On the busy streets of Jakarta, electric vehicles are an increasingly common sight. Sales are on the rise. The first half of this year saw more deliveries than all of 2023.
For people who are concerned about the environment, EVs are one way to try and help. Using electric cars can also save money.
The Indonesian government is working to boost the market with import tax exemptions. Those tax breaks, though, only apply if companies commit to building local production facilities. Since July, this factory has been cranking out EV batteries. A joint venture of South Korean firms Hyundai and LG, the $1.1 billion facility is the first of its kind in Southeast Asia.
Near future, the material come from Indonesia. Make a battery cell in Indonesia. Make a electric vehicle in Indonesia.
President Joko Widodo wants to make Indonesia an important global player across the EV supply chain. The country has one big advantage: the world's largest known reserves of nickel, a crucial element in EV batteries. Indonesia may have the raw materials, but it doesn't have the refining capacity. The factory is actually importing processed nickel from China and South Korea.
Just by having a nickel production doesn't mean we can rule the entire supply chain of electric vehicles. Right now we produce about half of global nickel production, but you only have about 0.4% of the battery production capacity.
And investment in the sector remains relatively small, meaning Indonesia has a long road ahead in its ambitions to become one of the world's top 3 EV battery producers.
The EU has given a final green light to steep tariffs on Chinese electric cars, some as high as 45.3%. It marks the end of the EU's highest profile investigation that has divided the bloc and prompted retaliation from Beijing. The extra tariffs range from 7.8% for Tesla to 35.3% for China's SAIC, and of course, that is on top of the EU's standard 10% car import duty. The EU Commission says tariffs are required to counter what it says are unfair subsidies from the Chinese government. Beijing has called them protectionist and damaging to EU-China relations, launching its own probes this year into imports of EU brandy, dairy and pork products in apparent retaliation. The EU tariffs will take effect Thursday and last for at least 5 years, Sharon.
Cami, thanks so much for that. That's Cami Knight joining us with all the evening's business news.